Time for business news now, and for that we're joined by Stephen Carroll. Steve, going to start now with fuel shortages in the United States because of a pipeline that was shut down last Friday. How bad are things getting?
We're seeing more and more of these pictures of people lining up to fill up their cars at filling stations in the eastern United States. Around 1,000 stations in the east of the country, particularly in the southeast, reporting running completely out of fuel in what's been described as unwarranted panic buying by consumers. This was after the Colonial Oil Pipeline was shut down after it was hit by a ransomware attack. That happened last Friday. It carries around half of the fuel that the East Coast uses from the South Coast up to the east. So it's a key supply link in that chain. Oil prices, or fuel prices I should say, have been creeping up as well. The average national price for gasoline in the US hitting its highest level in nearly 6 years as a result of this shortage of demand. Georgia, Virginia and North Carolina have all declared states of emergency over the fuel shortages. We are still talking about a very small number of stations. It's around less than 10% in most cases that have actually completely run out of fuel. But the effect that it's having is that more people are going to buy it, which is creating a further problem down the line.
Indeed, spinning off and more. But you know, when is the end of this shortage expected?
So the operators of the Colonial Pipeline have to update the US government by this evening on what their expectation is for reopening. They previously promised by the weekend. We'll get a better idea of that from later today. Even when service is fully restored on the pipeline, though, it'll take up to 2 weeks for supplies to get from Texas up to the East Coast where they're needed. The government in the US has been looking at other options if Colonial isn't able to restart operations quicker. That could include using foreign oil tankers, for example, to ship by sea oil from the South Coast to the East Coast. Washington has already lifted some of the limits on truck driver hours to allow them to be able to drive for longer to help, ease this supply crunch. Also, they're allowing trucks to be heavier than they usually are when they carry fuel in an effort to try and carry a bit more on those journeys as well. So this is a supply crunch that's very focused in parts of the United States. It's not affecting the broader oil markets. You can see here Brent crude and WTI pretty much unchanged by this situation in the US.
So what's happening on the stock market, Stephen?
So we had a day of sell-offs yesterday on the stock markets. Things do appear somewhat calmer today in trading. Investors have been spooked by the prospect of rising inflation in the United States, despite assurances from the Federal Reserve that a spike in price rises wouldn't change its monetary policy. European share markets had slumped yesterday. Today they've opened pretty flat at the start of trading, as you can see. In Asia, though, there were sharp falls on the indexes in Tokyo and in Seoul. Hong Kong and Shanghai just hanging on to some small gains there. Next, we're going to turn to the car maker Toyota, whose profits jumped by 10% in the past year, despite the pandemic and a global shortage of microchips. The Japanese car maker is now the world's largest, having overtaken Volkswagen last year. Experts say Toyota managed to avoid the supply disruption thanks to its forward planning system that was put in place after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan.
Well, next year in France, businesses are preparing for the next stage of the lifting of restrictions.
1 week to go until bars and restaurants can reopen their outdoor dining spaces in France. On Tuesday, the government announcing, though, that terraces would be limited to half capacity. That's a blow for some businesses who say the smaller space won't make reopening worthwhile. Yinka Oyatade reports.
It's just a week to go till this restaurateur can start serving her customers on the terrace again. Even if only half of the tables can be filled, she still feels a sense of relief.
Ça vaut le coup, de toute façon on prend ce qu'il y a à prendre, on va s'adapter, il faut surtout montrer aux clients qu'on est ouvert, on continue d'être là, on continue de vous ouvrir et honnêtement on est tellement content de rouvrir.
But for this owner, only reopening to 50% capacity makes no sense.
Normalement, j'ai 4 tables, 50% en terrasse, j'aurai 2 tables. Je ne vais pas ouvrir pour 4 clients.
He's hoping to expand his terrace along the pavement, but the extra tables may still not be enough to make up for losses.
On ne sera pas rentable, alors on va quand même ouvrir pour accueillir nos clients parce qu'il nous manque. Mais c'est vrai qu'économiquement, c'est pas viable et c'est même dangereux.
As the sector starts reopening, government aid to the hospitality industry will gradually be reduced. In June, owners can receive help amounting to 40% of their loss in turnover. This will drop to 30% in July and 20% in August. Unions are calling on the government to not withdraw aid too quickly.
Quoi qu'il arrive, jusqu'à la fin de l'été, à la fin de l'année, on a besoin, ou je dirais même jusqu'à la fin de l'épidémie, on a besoin d'être accompagné.
Since last spring, the hospitality industry in France has seen business plunge by 80%.
And finally, from you, Stephen, the ride-hailing companies Uber and Lyft are getting involved in the vaccine drive in the US.
They've signed up to a partnership with the White House to provide free trips to and from vaccination centres in the US. The companies had already been providing free or discounted rides in some circumstances, but this is now being expanded nationwide for anyone who's getting a shot. This, as the Biden administration is trying to reach its target of getting 70% of adults a first dose by the 4th of July. Uber and Lyft say they won't be paid by the federal government for this service, but it might help to bring back some customers to their ride-hailing services, which haven't recovered from the slump in business they've experienced over the past year.
Interesting. Stephen Carroll with our business news. Thanks indeed for that. It's time now to take a look